Some say in the midst of crisis lies great opportunity. Others say a crackerjack is a device for lifting biscuits. Both can be true. Let's talk about it. So how did we get to this position? Why is my motion platform and sim rig in bits, and I'm back to where I was about a year ago, building the motion platform, and it all started with me wanting to do a bit of a review and show you guys this thing here. This is a Virpil Shah KA collective grip for helicopter flight. This is something that I bought, I think, in the January sales, and then had to pay the same, sort of Virpil weight tax that everybody else has to do. Yes, that applies to me as well, just like you guys do. And I was in the mood to, unbox it, set it up, and of course I wanted to show you and share my thoughts with that. One of the recurring requests on my channel has been to basically show more actual flights and use of the motion rig. That's actually quite a difficult thing to film, because it requires filming multiple different angles and cameras, being able to do composite picture-in-picture, split screen type stuff, to be able to do the footage that you see through on other creators. And the truth is I haven't done that yet, but I'd been kind of reading up on how to do that, and I felt ready to do that. So I'm going through the process, I'm filming it, and I'm reviewing the footage. And although I could feel the motion when I was in the rig using this grip, what I was noticing was the motion platform wasn't moving anywhere near what I was expecting it to do, and it just didn't look right on camera, and it didn't feel right to me, and I needed to basically figure out what was going on and reshoot that whole kind of sequence for it to work, and I'll come back to that in the weeks ahead, hopefully. See how we get on. And in order to do that, what I'd set up was a Russian helicopter, the Hind helicopter Mi-24 in DCS, which I hadn't set up before with the motion software, the Kinebasics software, because I'm trying to use DRSM more now, Departed Reality Sim Manager, and although I'd got it connected up and running and working, like, as I say, the motion wasn't right at all. The motion cueing, in particular, the range, the speed of motion wasn't right. Now I think I've got a pretty good idea what's causing that. I asked for some advice on Discord and forums and things like that, and it turns out that what's likely going on is I'm just over filtering at the hardware level, at the Motion for Sim board level. So even if I'm making adjustments and settings in DRSM to say, give me more movement, give me more amplitude, I'm being kind of filtered and cut off. So I need to look at things like spike filters and something called EMALP, which is a low pass filter on motion to smooth out and protect the rig, protect you and from discomfort if it's moving too quickly or too violently or something like that. And of course, at this point, I'm in a bit of a troubleshooting mode. So what do? you check to see if all your firmware is up to date, don't you? Which PC users will be familiar with. And that's where things all started to go a bit wrong for me. In part, I think, some of it's on me about not being prepared. Maybe I went into it a bit too casually. But it turns out that there's been some bugs in the latest firmware release, and boy, did I experience those bugs in a big way. So let's go back to the motion rig, and I'll talk you through what I was experiencing, and we'll take a closer look and maybe how we solve the problem as well. Was wir brauchen, ist eine forensische Untersuchung oder das Problem, which loosely translates to, I need to figure my shit out. Let me show you what a good startup sequence looks like for the Motion for Sim controller. I'm just applying a power to it here, and you can see that it reports the firmware version, the PCB version. It reads configuration from the onboard memory and storage, and it puts it into this homing state, or rather it's prompting me to push the encoder button here to start homing. I've not got the servo motors switched on at the moment, so it's not going to do anything, just the board has got power. But that's what a good startup sequence looks like. Now in my case, what I did was I loaded or installed the latest dashboard companion app and asked it to do a firmware update to the latest version, and I trusted it to go forward and use the right one, because there are more than one firmware versions. To cut a long story short, that update failed and left me in a locked out state, which looks like this on the Motion handset and the Motion for Sim handset. As you can see, it's completely blank and gives you no options, no interaction with it to do anything, no factory reset or anything like that. Completely locked out. Now initially I thought, oh gosh, have I gone and tried to put the wrong firmware version on there? But it turns out no, it had detected what should have been the right version, and there's actually a problem with the latest dashboard with my version of the hardware. So remember when you saw it boot up earlier, it said PCB 115. That means it's an older version of the board that sits inside of the motion rig with all the microcontrollers on and so on. And it wasn't successfully able to do the firmware updates for me. Now the good news was I went back onto the Discord forums and got some advice and some instructions on how to do a factory reset, thank goodness, because otherwise you're typically faced with having to return your hardware for a replacement, and hey, guess what, if it's your fault, then that's not going to be a free service at all. And what PC users typically worry about is power outages and things like that. Now, some of the hardware you can reset from the handset. In my particular case, I went through that routine and I couldn't, so it probably isn't supported on this particular version that I'm using. I'm not particularly concerned about upgrading to a more modern version of the hardware, because what that's basically doing is adding new features that I can't take advantage of because of the motors that I'm using. It's there to support a new motion protocol known as EtherCAT, and some additional features like wind simulation, and I'm sure some other stuff as well. The wind simulation actually might be quite interesting for me, but unless I change my servo motors and drivers, I can't take advantage of any of the EtherCAT stuff. But that's a topic for another video, I think. It is possible to reset the Motion for Sim board. And the problem I've got, though, is if I've moved the camera over slightly, I mean, we're going to struggle to to see it down there, but where all the white cables are disappearing into that plastic hole and fascia in the middle there. In fact, you might see if you look deeper down in there, if I move it around a bit, they plug into the motion for sim board that's got a plastic housing around it to protect it from dust and damage and things like that. Now, there's 2 buttons on there that, when depressed and released together, puts the motion for sim board back into a bootloader state, which allows it to accept a new firmware. This is very good, except in my case, as you can see, there's not a lot of room in there. I mean, I can't fit my hand down that plastic hole in the middle. I can, of course, and did remove it, but even then, because of the length of the gearboxes that I'm using and the length of the servo drives and things like that, the board and the plastic housing actually most of it sits underneath all of this hardware that you see around you here. So you haven't got very good access to it at all. What I was able to do, though, was by removing some of the covers and panels, is get my hand into the top, and using the car jack, lift up the motion platform from the front, and get my hand in underneath, and between the two of those, get the 2 buttons pressed and reset, and ultimately then able to force the new firmware onto the motion for sim board. Okay, so with the new firmware now installed and updated, and the handset reporting a successful boot sequence ready for homing, this is looking good, very nice. And what you would imagine next is that's you put some power onto the motion platform. The servo drivers, the white boxes come online, and yeah, the device is ready for homing. So let me show you what the proper homing start looks like, and it's probably easier if I focus on the LED displays of the servo drivers rather than looking. Oh, maybe I can, if I keep that in shot there, you might see some small movements of the crank arms connected to the servo motors. But what I want you to note is how these change a very small amount and then settle back to 0 again. That's what a good homing sequence startup looks like. Yeah, so small amounts of movement back to 0. And this is the device essentially finding its rest position, its parked position, using, I would imagine, a combination of the encoders, which tell the motors what position that they're in. And I think certainly when you do it for the first time, what it does is it rotates these crank arms in anti-clockwise direction. I guess it would probably depend on the actuator. No, anti-clockwise, I think it would be true for all of them. And they come to rest on the metal feet here. And obviously they can't push past that. So what that translates to is the servo motor tries even harder, and there's a spike in the current. And of course that's detectable, and the microcontroller board will say, well, I've seen the spike in current, don't go any further. That's as far as you can go. Go back a few degrees to a rest position, and there you are. And you can manually calibrate it if you want to go any further. What I was experiencing with the new firmware was something very different. Bearing in mind, at that point, I've still got the full sim rig installed on here. The profile, the seats, the joystick peripherals, and throttles and pedals and everything. And what I was experiencing was these crank arms going in a clockwise direction, and I thought immediately, well, that's not right. But it was doing it in a controlled way, so I didn't know whether that was a new feature of the firmware or anything like that. So these things are rising. The rig is moving up into its, and I let it get into its highest position. I think, gosh, this isn't going to stop here. Yeah, I start to get worried. So I hit the emergency stop button, and what that should do is just cause the rig to stop in position. So with my servo motors, these don't have an electronic brake on them simply because there's not enough room inside of the housing here. Other motion platforms might use brakes, and that's a good thing if they do use that. It is a possibility with this platform, but you have to use different motors, and it's quite an involved process for me to change those, and that's a subject for another video. So the platform with the sim rig on top is in its highest position and stopped. And what I'm thinking of in that point is, well, how am I going to get it back down and safe? Because clearly something's not right. Something's wrong. I can't leave it there. I can't leave it powered on, forevermore in that position. If I turn the power off, what will happen is the whole platform will drop. The only reason it's staying up and supporting its weight is power going to the motors. Otherwise, it's just the resistance of the gearboxes, which, yeah, if I can show you that, I'll turn the power off to the rig. It is not that great. I can, without too much force, grab one of these crank arms and move it manually myself. Also a good way to feel the levels of cogging in there. But the point is, there's not enough resistance in there to keep the weight of the sim rig and the Stuart platform here in its position. So what do I do about it? Well, what I need to do is take manual control with the handset or the dashboard and ask all of the actuators to rotate back down and bring the platform back down. But I can't do that while it's in this emergency state because of the emergency stop button that I've pressed. So I release the emergency stop button, and then what starts happening is, rather than me being able to gain control of the device again, it continues with its false or defective homing operation, and these crank arms are going past the the highest position and starting to go round. I think they literally would have gone round fully to the other side, and yeah, I'm sort of struggling for for a solution there. So again, I panic and hit the emergency stop button. But as I'm going to do that, my UPS power supply, uninterruptible power supply in the background, starts giving out an alert to a beep, a warning sign that something isn't right. And I'm thinking, crikey, well, have I lost power as well in all of this? But other things were still powered on in the house, so it wasn't like a power cut. The PC was still working, and that brings us on to the next stage of the problem. So now I'm in a really bad situation. The actuators, the crank arms, are in completely the wrong position for a homing operation, even for like normal motion. They've gone beyond the rotation limits that they should be going to, and not doing it in a coordinated way. If you want to try and picture it, the Stuart platform's in its almost highest position with the sim rig on top of it. It's lurching off to one side, and I've lost power basically. So of course, what it does is just tries to obey gravity, which in this case is to start to fall down quite quickly. But it's also wanting to move this way because for some reason that's where the actuators and the platform were left, as though it had been swayed in the 6-off axis, effectively, falling against the wall like here. You can probably see the damage to the whiteboard. There's a couple of dents and a scratch here and scratches on the radiator. Really bad position to be in. Things have gone from bad to worse, effectively. So what caused that, and effectively what is it that I can effectively do about it? So if we deal with the next sequence of events, probably the smartest decision I made was to prioritize the safety of the rig. So completely disconnect the power. And one of the biggest risks is, of course, you've got this very heavy sim rig situation that's out of balance. So the last thing I want it to do is move. So I don't want to turn the power back on because I can't predict what it's going to do. I don't trust that I'm going to be able to get control back via the handset. The best thing for me to do is to start to dismantle the rig, to take the weight away, because then I can physically manage and move just the Stewart platform part of the rig myself and move it back into position, which is effectively as you see it now. That process took, I would say, about 3 hours, by the way, if you're thinking of doing that yourself. So removing the pedals, removing the flight sim hardware, or at least most of it, removing the seats, removing the seatbelt tensioner, and then ultimately the aluminium profile rig, the sim rig that forms the basis, removing it from its mounting plates back to its kind of default position before going any further, because otherwise, I'm risking, damage to the radiator if it wants to fall for any reasons. I've got pets, as you know, I can't have them at risk, even for my personal injury sake. 100 kilograms falling onto your leg foot could break your foot, your toe, your ankle, or something like that, and be an even bigger problem. So prioritize the safety. I did that, and then I could start to troubleshoot what caused the issue. So what I discovered, and I have to accept some responsibility here, and in fact part of the clue to what caused it, even you can see here where I've got this white DB25 cable going into the handset and the board. But do you see how it comes out from the rig here and loops back round on top? So I've got freedom to move this anywhere I want externally to the rig. But of course, what it does mean is if these crank arms ever came round to come into the contact with this wire, there's a risk it could be trapped and potentially damaged and severed. Now, to my thinking is, or was simply, well, that's never going to happen. There's these crank arms have got no business going round that far. There's limits put on the rig and things like that. But if you combine the faulty firmware with the power loss, then of course, it's just gravity forcing them over there, and the position of the crank arm with the faulty firmware, those arms being in a place that they've got no right to be in. So what caused the problem? And the answer lies in this power cable here. So what we're looking at, if I bring it closer for inspection, you might be able to see that there, right by my index finger there. There is damage to the cable and a break here. And I think what's happened is this has been damaged by a crank arm being out of position. Probably, what's this, motor number 4 here is the most likely culprit. And the UPS supply has detected the fault and the short, and to protect an earthing fault or risk of electrocution or anything like that, it has decided to not preserve power to the rig, but to actually cut it for reasons of safety. And you might think, well, how on earth did that happen? Surely you wouldn't put this cable in risk of being damaged by one of the crank arms. So in honesty and in truth, I may have had it plugged in here. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, because I had a power strip there going into the rig into a power brick, and then this cable's there to feed a powered USB hub. Or I might have been using this power strip here internally, and because of the cable length, it being pushed or looped on the outside, and I hadn't really given it too much attention because I never thought it was at risk of being damaged. But because of the unusual situation, actually, it was damaged and then caused me a whole host of problems. So basically, between the combination of, well, the dashboard issue and the firmware updates is just really just an annoyance, a waste of time, a bug that didn't really cause me a huge amount of problems other than having to reset the board and flash the firmware in expert mode or more manually, which, as I explained, I'd already done. But the fact that the new firmware was homing incorrectly and causing all sorts of bad behavior with the servo motors, that started a chain of events that resulted in some sloppy cable management from my side. And as you see before you, the sim rig now dismantled from the motion platform. And that, I think, kind of summarizes the story. Now, what I would add to all of this is, whilst I was going through some of these problems, I probably should have, when I first had to use the emergency stop button, paused at that point and gone and sought some help and support, rather than trying to figure it out myself and potentially making some bad decisions. In my defense and fairness, I would say, look, when I built this over a year ago, 18 months ago at least, I did do some testing. I became much more acquainted with the rig and the controls, the manual controls, because there's a lot to take in and understand. And I'd forgotten perhaps some of that, the effects of factory resets and taking manual control and the exact cause and effects of using the emergency stop button. Yeah, that's what ultimately led to this chain of events. And sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What I was going to say was I was getting some support following the incidents, the motion rig being out of position and damaged and against the wall here. And whilst I was taking time to dismantle it, I was in contact with the owner, who was offering me some guidance and advice. And what we've been able to do is go back to the earlier version of firmware that we know works with the dashboard version that works with this firmware as well. And he's very quickly taken that firmware offline, which for some people I don't think it would have an impact to, but I suspect if you've got the same PCB version of board that I do, that it could cause you problems. Hopefully not to the extent that it's caused me, but as I say, I have to accept some responsibility in that as well. So there we are. That's the crisis situation and how I find myself in at the moment. So let me give you some reflections on that, and also the opportunity going forward, the opportunity that this gives me and allows me to maybe change some things as to how I approach the maintenance and the learning, the understanding, the settings of the motion rig. Okay, so where do I go from here? How do I get back to a functioning motion platform and sim rig, and what opportunities have been created as a result of this? Well, firstly, the fact that the sim rig's removed from the device, it allows me to go back with more knowledge and test a few things to get them clear in my own mind and make some notes, and actually the topic of a future video. For example, because I haven't got the weight of the platform on here, I can test the motion and start pulling out cables to simulate power loss. I can test by understanding the impact of the emergency stop button. I can try to answer the question ahead of time. If I've activated the emergency stop, how do I regain control of the rig? What's the right thing to do? If I spot something isn't working right, how do I activate the the stop quicker? Also, I've been obviously giving all of this feedback to the owner, who's effectively protected other people from experiencing the same issue. I think it's fair to say that he's learnt something from this as well. So we'll probably see I'm hoping to see a more rigorous testing process, but I'm also expecting, an updated firmware that is going to work and function as we would expect, and I'd be a lot more prepared for it next time. And it's taught me to perhaps not be so casual about the firmware update process, because of course I come into this thinking falsely, like it's the world of a PC BIOS update. But of course, with a motion rig, it's a much more serious prospect. Imagine, what would be a good analogy? An electric car. Imagine that doing a firmware update overnight. You get into it in the morning, and you press the accelerator pedal to move off, and your car ends up going backwards and smashes into your neighbour's car behind it, or your shed, or something like that. You bring physical motion with heavy objects into play, and it's a whole new ball game that you have to take seriously. Honestly, I think I've gotten away with it lightly. I've done some inspection on the motion rig, and I can't see any kind of lasting damage has been done. Some of the peripheral devices have been damaged, and as I was saying earlier, I've managed to take a sizable slice out of my dent out of my whiteboard. But you know what? That probably serves as a reminder to me about this whole incident. And it also says to me, actually, I probably need to move the motion rig a little bit further out, because although I've allowed enough clearance, of course, I've added things to the top of the rig, things that come off the side, like throttles and control panels. Extra bits that make the platform wider, and therefore I need more space to be able to do that. Otherwise, if it sways or yaws in a certain direction, it'll end up colliding with my sort of chest of drawers there and there, or the wall, the radiator, and all sorts of mess. And that's up to me to to sort that out, and I can experiment with it a lot more and a lot safer with the sim rig not being there. So that's good, and some future videos coming up on that topic. It's also going to allow me the opportunity to really experiment with the spike filters and the EMAP low pass filters that I was talking about earlier, without fear of damaging either the the sim rig or the motion rig with too extreme movement. I can kind of push it to the limits, because there's relatively little weight on top of the platform here. So that's a good thing. I can learn and experiment with those settings and get DRSM hopefully up and running before I start bolting the rig back together. The other thing it allows me to do is some maintenance on the rig. So just removing dust that's collected over 18 months. The dust is never good for electronics. To check the nuts, the bolts, the screws, to make sure that they're still relatively tight. In fact, I was looking the other day, and I don't know if you can see there, but I'm actually missing an M8. I think it's an M8 bolt anyway, that goes in that hole there. I have no idea where that is. It might be that I removed it as I was dismantling some of the the access panels. But yeah, that's not right. I came across one of the nuts on the crank arm here that connects it to the vertical arm was loose on one round the other side. So it's a really good opportunity for me to go and check those things to improve the rig. Something I never finished off or got around to was putting these end caps on the feet. There's only one installed there at the moment, but I've got the rest sitting in a bag in one of the drawers, so I can do that now. most of all, what I can do, of course, is sort my bloody cabling out. That has caused me a problem. It wasn't expected, but I've got a new respect for that, and I'm going to take the opportunity to, as I'm putting the profile back on and adding devices back on, to really take some care as to routing the cables properly. What I've done already is this power strip here. The cable goes into the central section, the access panel here, and then out through the bottom, and will connect to the UPS supply. So the cable will come out underneath the rig, a little bit like this USB cable here that goes to the PC at the moment, and it will be clearly out of the way of the crank arms. I will move this controller cable here, so that it's not at risk of being cut off the side there. Well, assuming I can fit the the rectangular DB25 thing through that access hole, I should be able to do that. I've already this black cable here. I've already routed that. That's the power cable for the seatbelt tension, the cubic seatbelt tensioner. So I'll leave the power supply on the floor and probably tucked under the rig again, out of the way of the controls. This device, I don't think needs a UPS supply, but I've got it connected to the UPS at the moment. Not everything does need to be power protected, but what does absolutely need to be power protected is the power distribution unit that connects all the sends power to all of the servo motors and drivers, and the board itself, the M4S controller board, which is why I use powered USB hubs. And what I will make sure I do now is the power bricks for those will go onto this power distribution unit here that will be connected to the UPS. So I won't lose power to my USB devices, even if there's a power cuts or a circuit break or something like that within the house. That's when the UPS will kick in and temporarily supply power enough for me to get out and make the rig safe, of course. Yeah, so learning opportunity. I'll make some notes for my own records so I don't have to try and work it out next time that I'm better prepared. Maintenance, access, cleaning, and ultimately being able to sort out that filtering issue. And I will come back to you with that review of the Shah KA collective grip. And there we go. So I'll finish off as promised with a photo I took of the sim rig in its ungodly position. Yeah, a scary moment for sure. But I'm happy to say, I've since powered on the rig and homed it and sent in some basic control commands, and it seems to be behaving normally. So I don't think any lasting damage done to the motion platform. This thing is built really well and is very solid. So pleased about that. I think I've gotten away with it, but I've learnt a lot through the process. So I hope you find that useful. Thank you for sticking around and going through that. And we should have some more interesting videos on those learnings as we go forward. Thanks, and bye for now.